"Useless girl, you were never the bright one," my father said again, his voice carrying across the living room where my relatives sat sipping their drinks and pretending not to hear. I stood frozen, the certificate I had been so excited to share still clutched in my hand, suddenly feeling like a child's drawing rather than the regional business competition award it was. My name is Vanessa Graves, and at 31 years old, I had spent my entire life hearing variations of that phrase. Growing up in Columbus, Ohio, in the shadow of my brother Logan, had been an exercise in invisibility. Logan was the golden child. His academic achievements, athletic trophies, and later his business ventures were celebrated with enthusiasm and pride. My accomplishments, no matter how significant, were brushed aside like crumbs from the dinner table. "Dad, I was thinking about expanding the company into," I began, trying again despite the knot in my stomach. "Vanessa, please," my father interrupted, rubbing his forehead as though my voice gave him a headache. "Your brother just secured a $1 million contract. Can we focus on actual success for a moment?" I watched as my mother gave me a sympathetic glance but remained silent. My Aunt Patricia patted my hand and whispered, "Maybe business isn't your thing, dear. You were always so good with your little crafts." Little crafts. My tech startup that had been growing steadily for 3 years was reduced to a hobby in their eyes. I nodded politely and excused myself to the kitchen, where I leaned against the counter and took deep breaths. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from my business partner, Eliza. "Did you tell them about the investor meeting?" I typed back, "Not yet. Timing's not right." What I didn't say was that the timing would never be right in this house. My father, Robert Graves, retired engineer and self-proclaimed business expert, had decided long ago that I lacked what it took to succeed. Too emotional, he'd say, not strategic enough. And my personal favorite, not CEO material. As I composed myself, I could hear Logan holding court in the living room, my father's proud laughter punctuating the conversation. Through the doorway, I saw him clap my brother on the shoulder, a gesture I couldn't remember ever receiving. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, straightened my shoulders, and rejoined the family gathering with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Little did they know, but this dismissal was fueling something inside me, something that would soon force them all to see me in a very different light. The next day, I arrived at our modest office space in a renovated warehouse on the edge of downtown Columbus. My company, NeuroSync, had started as nothing more than an idea sketched on napkins during my lunch breaks at my previous corporate job. Now we occupied half a floor, with 15 employees and technology that was beginning to make waves in the predictive analytics field. Eliza looked up as I entered, her expression immediately telling me she could sense yesterday's family dinner still hanging over me. "That bad, huh?" she asked, sliding a coffee across her desk toward me. "Same story, different day," I replied, taking the cup gratefully. Logan secured some contract with the state government, and you'd think he'd single-handedly solved world hunger. Eliza rolled her eyes. "And meanwhile, we're just over here revolutionizing how businesses understand consumer behavior. Nothing important." I smiled despite myself. This was why Eliza and I worked so well together. She understood both the technology and the weight of constant underestimation. "The investor meeting is confirmed for Thursday," she continued. "Westlake Ventures wants to see the new algorithm in action. If it goes well—" "When it goes well," I corrected her, "we'll have the capital to scale up and take on Horizon Data directly." Horizon Data was our main competitor, larger, more established, and coincidentally, a company that had rejected my job application 4 years ago. Their CEO had suggested I look into something less technical. That rejection letter still sat in my desk drawer, a constant reminder. Back at my childhood home, there were other reminders. Photographs of Logan receiving awards dominated the mantelpiece. The newspaper clipping about his scholarship to Wharton was framed in the hallway. My graduation photo was somewhere in a dusty album, rarely seen and never displayed. During my college years, I'd come home excited about being selected for an exclusive tech internship, only to have my father wave it off and ask when I was going to find a real career path. When I made the dean's list studying computer science, my mother merely noted that it must be getting easier these days. I had learned to stop sharing with them, to keep my dreams and achievements tucked away where they couldn't be diminished. For 3 years, I had lived in a tiny apartment, eating ramen noodles and pouring every dollar back into NeuroSync. I worked 18-hour days, read every business book I could find, and learned from every mistake. All while hearing my father's voice in my head. Useless girl. You were never the bright one. The conference room at Westlake Ventures felt too warm, despite the sleek air conditioning units humming quietly overhead. I adjusted my blazer and glanced at Eliza, who gave me a subtle nod. We had practiced this presentation a dozen times, but the stakes had never been higher. As you can see from our projections, I continued, gesturing to the screen behind me, NeuroSync's algorithm has consistently outperformed market standards by 27%. What this means for retail implementation is an unprecedented level of customer behavior prediction. Gregory Westlake, the silver-haired founder of the venture capital firm, leaned forward slightly. And your competitors? How does Horizon Data's new platform compare? I had anticipated this question. Horizon's approach relies on historical data sets. Our algorithm incorporates real-time emotional response indicators. Simply put, they can tell you what customers did yesterday. We can tell you what they'll do tomorrow. The room shifted. I could feel the energy change as the investors exchanged glances. This was the moment, the tipping point I had been working toward for years. 2 hours later, Eliza and I stood in the lobby, still in shock. Westlake had not only agreed to invest, they wanted to lead a funding round that would value NeuroSync at $90 million. The deal would transform our company overnight and position us as the industry leader in consumer predictive technology. We did it, Eliza whispered, her usual composure cracking as a grin spread across her face. Vanessa, we actually did it. I nodded, a strange numbness replacing the adrenaline that had carried me through the meeting. We need to call the team, and the lawyers, and... My phone rang, interrupting my mental list-making. It was my mother. For a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail, but some old habit made me answer. Hello? Vanessa, don't forget your father's retirement party is next Sunday. The whole family will be there, and it would look strange if you weren't. You know how people talk. I closed my eyes briefly. Yes, Mom. I'll be there. Good. Oh, and Logan just closed another deal. He'll be announcing his promotion to vice president at the party. Isn't that wonderful? Maybe you can bring those cookies you used to make. Everyone always liked those. The contrast was so stark it was almost comical. In one moment, I was negotiating a multi-million-dollar deal that would change the face of an industry. In the next, I was being asked to bring cookies to celebrate someone else's success. Actually, Mom, I might have some news of my own to share by then. That's nice, dear. Just remember your father doesn't like anything too sweet. The doctor says his blood sugar... As she continued, I caught Eliza's eye. She raised an eyebrow questioningly, and I just shook my head slightly. Some things never changed, but I was about to. The week that followed our successful pitch was the most intense of my professional life. Days blurred into nights as lawyers drafted agreements, term sheets were negotiated, and press releases were carefully worded. I existed on caffeine and determination, barely registering the outside world beyond the whirlwind of NeuroSync's impending transformation. Thursday morning, I was reviewing the final investment documents when Eliza burst into my office, her typically composed demeanor replaced by barely contained excitement. Have you seen it? She demanded, thrusting her tablet toward me. I looked up, bleary-eyed from poring over legal language. Seen what? Forbes, Business Insider, The Wall Street Journal, they're all running the story. I took the tablet, and there it was, my face staring back at me from the Forbes website. The headline read, Disruptor Alert. Vanessa Graves named youngest female CEO in tech after landmark investment deal. My stomach dropped. The announcement wasn't supposed to go public until next week, after all the paperwork was finalized, and after I'd had a chance to tell my family in person. I quickly scanned the article, which detailed the investment deal and highlighted my journey from startup founder to CEO of what was now being called the most exciting tech firm in the Midwest. Several other outlets had picked up the story, each putting their own spin on it. Business Insider focused on the technology itself. The Wall Street Journal examined the market implications of our rise against established players like Horizon Data. But the one that made my throat tighten was from the Columbus Business Journal, our local publication. Columbus native Vanessa Graves makes history with NeuroSync valuation. Everyone would see it, including my family. As if summoned by my thought, my phone began to vibrate with incoming messages. Colleagues, old classmates, distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, all suddenly aware of my success. But nothing from my parents or Logan. The silence from them was deafening. "This is huge," Eliza said, reclaiming her tablet. "We should celebrate." I nodded absently, still processing the implications. "We will. But first, I need to make a call." After Eliza left, I dialed my parents' number, expecting my mother's usual cheerful greeting. Instead, my father answered. His voice clipped. "Graves residence." "Dad, it's me. I suppose you think we'd be impressed," he interrupted, "making a spectacle in the business pages." I blinked, taken aback. That wasn't intentional. The announcement went out early. Logan's been working for years to build a respectable career step by step, but you always needed to make a show of things, didn't you? The familiar sting of his dismissal hit, but this time something different followed. Anger. A show? Dad, I built this company from nothing. No connections, no family support, not even a word of encouragement. And now you've got your name in some articles. Congratulations. We'll see how long it lasts before reality sets in. I gripped the phone tighter. The reality is that I'm now the CEO of a $90 million company that's changing the industry. That's not just some articles. "Listen to me," he said, his voice lowering to that tone he used when he thought he was imparting wisdom. "This tech bubble you're riding will burst. It always does. Logan's built something solid, something real." I closed my eyes, suddenly tired of the same old narrative. "Dad, I have to go. I'll see you at the retirement party on Sunday." "Vanessa," he started, but I had already hung up. I sat in silence for a moment, then reached for my laptop. If my family couldn't see my worth, perhaps it was time to show them in a way they couldn't ignore. Sunday arrived warm and clear, a perfect early summer day for an outdoor retirement celebration. I had deliberately not called my parents again after that conversation with my father, letting the media coverage speak for itself. Over the past few days, the story had grown, with several business programs featuring segments on NeuroSync and my unconventional path to success. I sat in my car outside my parents' suburban home, watching guests arrive, relatives, my father's former colleagues, neighbors, and family friends. All people who had witnessed my relegation to the background over the years. With a deep breath, I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusted my designer sunglasses, and stepped out of my new Jaguar F-Type, a congratulatory gift to myself that I'd picked up just yesterday. The sleek vehicle, with its gleaming red exterior and purring engine, was not subtle, nor was it meant to be. As I retrieved a small, elegantly wrapped package from the passenger seat, I felt eyes turning in my direction. Cousin Drew, always the first to notice anything automotive, stopped mid-conversation, his mouth slightly open. "Is that Vanessa?" I smiled and handed him the keys. "Mind parking it for me? The driveway's getting crowded." His eyes widened as he took the keys, treating them like precious artifacts. "This is the V8, right?" The sound is unmistakable. "Goodyear," I replied, enjoying the way the small crowd by the garage had turned to stare. "Just be careful with the trim. It's custom." I made my way toward the backyard, where tables had been set up on the lawn. The familiar smell of my father's barbecue filled the air, mixing with the perfume of my mother's carefully tended flower beds. Some things never changed, but I certainly had. My mother spotted me first, her greeting freezing on her lips as she took in my appearance. Gone was the practical, understated daughter they were used to. Today I wore a tailored cream suit with a bold blue silk blouse, designer heels, and jewelry that quietly spoke of success. "Vanessa," she managed finally, "you look different." "Thank you," I said, kissing her cheek. "Where's Dad?" "I brought him something." She gestured toward the grill, where my father stood in his element, surrounded by male relatives and friends hanging on his every grilling tip. I approached the group, conscious of the conversation dying down as I neared. "Dad," I said, extending the small package. "Happy retirement." He turned, his expression unreadable as he took in my transformation. For a moment, I thought he might make a scene or dismiss me again. Instead, he accepted the gift with a nod. "You didn't need to bring anything," he said stiffly. "I wanted to," I replied, maintaining eye contact. After all, it's not every day my father retires after 30 years. The men around us watched this exchange with interest, several of them clearly having read the recent articles about me. I could see recognition in their eyes, followed by confusion, as they observed the cool interaction between us. "Well," my father said, making no move to open the gift, "I should get back to these steaks before they burn." "Of course," I said, smiling politely. "We wouldn't want that." As I turned to walk away, I heard one of his friends say, "Bob, isn't that your daughter who's been in the news?" "The CEO?" I didn't stay to hear his response, instead making my way to where Logan stood with his wife, Jennifer, both of them watching me approach with poorly concealed surprise. "Quite an entrance, sis," Logan said, his usual confident tone tinged with something else, uncertainty perhaps. "Nice car?" "Thanks," I replied. "Business must be treating you well too. Mom mentioned a promotion to vice president? Congratulations." Before he could respond, Jennifer cut in. "We read about your company. It's very impressive. Why didn't you tell anyone what you were working on all these years?" The question hung in the air, genuine curiosity in her voice. Why hadn't I? "I did," I answered Jennifer simply. "Many times, no one was interested in listening." Logan shifted uncomfortably, clearly remembering the family dinners where my attempts to discuss my business were brushed aside or talked over. To his credit, he looked somewhat ashamed. "Well, we're all certainly interested now," Jennifer continued, either oblivious to the tension or determined to push past it. "Everyone's talking about that valuation. $90 million? That's incredible, Vanessa." I noticed how heads turned at nearby tables when she said the figure. Whispers spread like ripples in a pond, relatives and family friends suddenly realizing the scale of what I had accomplished. "Thank you," I said. "It's been a long road, but the technology is revolutionary. We're changing how businesses understand consumer behavior." Logan cleared his throat. "I'd love to hear more about it sometime. Maybe we could grab lunch? My company might even be interested in implementing something like that." The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 years ago, I'd approached Logan about a potential partnership, excited to share my early prototypes with someone I thought would understand their value. He had declined, suggesting I focus on something more established first. "I'll have my assistant reach out," I replied, the polite corporate response coming easily now. "Our implementation calendar is pretty full through the next quarter, but we might be able to squeeze you in." His expression faltered at being treated like any other client rather than family. Before he could respond, my Aunt Patricia appeared, pulling me into a perfumed embrace. "Vanessa, darling, why didn't you tell us you were such a big success? We had no idea," she gushed, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. This was the same aunt who had referred to my business as Little Crafts just months ago. "I tried," I said, maintaining my smile. It just never seemed to be the right time to share. As the afternoon progressed, the dynamic shifted palpably. Relatives who had previously gravitated toward Logan now sought me out, asking about NeuroSync, about what it was like to be featured in Forbes, about my secrets to success. I answered graciously, but with a professional distance that was new to our family gatherings. My father remained by the grill, his domain, watching this transformation of his usually overlooked daughter, with an expression I couldn't quite read. He had still not opened my gift, a custom-engraved watch I'd had made specifically for him, bearing the inscription, "To New Beginnings. Love, Vanessa." Eventually, as dessert was being served, my father tapped his glass for attention. The backyard quieted as everyone turned toward him, expecting the retirement speech he had likely been planning for months. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, his voice carrying across the yard. "Ending a 30-year career is a milestone worth marking, and having you all here means the world to me and Joyce." He continued with anecdotes from his years as an engineer, thanked colleagues who had become friends, and then turned to family acknowledgments. "And of course, I'm proud of my children. Logan, who's making his mark at Hamilton Financial, recently promoted to vice president." A polite round of applause followed, Logan nodding appreciatively. "And Vanessa," my father continued, his voice faltering slightly as every eye turned to me, "who apparently has been quietly building something none of us fully understood." The yard was silent now, the tension palpable. I met my father's gaze steadily, waiting. "I always said she was the emotional one," he added with a small laugh that few joined. "It seems I may have underestimated how far that emotional intelligence could take her." It wasn't an apology, not even close. But it was the first public acknowledgement from my father that he might have been wrong about me. As the gathered family and friends raised their glasses, I saw something new in many of their eyes: respect. The retirement party continued into the evening, with conversations buzzing under strings of backyard lights. I moved between groups with a newfound confidence, no longer the awkward family member relegated to the sidelines. The subtle shift in dynamics was fascinating to observe. Relatives who had barely spoken to me at previous gatherings now hung on my every word. As the night progressed, I found a moment alone with my father. He stood at the edge of the yard, nursing a whiskey and gazing at the garden my mother had spent years perfecting. "You haven't opened your gift," I said, nodding toward the small package still sitting unopened on the gift table. He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I wanted to wait until it was quieter. I nodded, accepting this explanation, though I suspected he simply hadn't wanted to open it in front of everyone after our earlier exchange. "So," he said finally. "CEO. Yes. Of a $90 million company. Yes." He swirled the ice in his glass. "And the youngest woman to do it, according to those articles. That's what they say." A long pause followed, filled with decades of misunderstanding and dismissal. "I don't understand it," he admitted. "This tech stuff. In my day, business was straightforward. Products you could hold, services you could see." I considered explaining how our algorithm worked, how it was revolutionizing an entire industry, but realized it wouldn't matter. This wasn't about understanding my business. It was about him finally seeing me. "You don't need to understand the technology, Dad. Just understand that I built something valuable, something lasting." He nodded slowly, then gestured toward the front of the house. "That car. That's quite a statement." I smiled. It wasn't meant to be a statement. It was meant to be a reward for years of hard work. "Still," he said, his voice lower now, "pulling up like that, after all those articles, you knew what you were doing." "Yes," I admitted. I did. 2 months after my father's retirement party, NeuroSync's new headquarters opened in downtown Columbus. The gleaming glass building stood as a physical manifestation of how far we'd come from our humble beginnings in that shared workspace. Employees, investors, and local business leaders gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, and to my surprise, my entire family attended. My mother hugged me tightly before the ceremony began. "We're so proud of you, Vanessa. I'm sorry if we didn't show it before." I returned her embrace, recognizing the genuine emotion behind her words. She had always been caught between my father's dismissal and her own desire to support me. Today, she didn't have to choose. Logan approached next, looking both impressed and slightly uncomfortable among the tech crowd. "This is incredible, sis. Seriously, I had no idea this was what you were building." "That's because you never asked," I replied, but without the bitterness that would have colored such a statement months ago. Success had softened those old wounds. And then there was my father, standing awkwardly near the entrance, taking in the sleek architecture and the buzz of excitement. He wore the watch I had given him, I noticed. A small gesture, but significant. I walked over to him, conscious of the eyes that followed me, the CEO in her element. "Thank you for coming," I said. He nodded, uncharacteristically subdued. "Wouldn't have missed it." I could have left it there, this tentative peace between us. But there was one thing I needed to say. Not out of spite, but for my own closure. "You know, Dad, all those times you called me useless, told me I wasn't the bright one, it hurt, but it also pushed me to prove you wrong." He looked at me, his expression a complex mix of pride and regret. "You certainly did that." "Yes," I agreed. "I did." And in that moment, standing in the building that bore my company's name, surrounded by the empire I had built, I finally felt free of the need for his approval. I was Vanessa Graves, CEO, visionary and architect of my own success, and no one would ever call me useless again.